All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for attending our public information meeting for the Environmental Impact Report that's being prepared for the county sustainability update. And I am Stephanie Hansen. I'm the Assistant Director, one of them, in the newly formed Community Development and Infrastructure Departments, which is a merger of the Planning and Public Works Departments. Yeah. Okay, this evening's meeting is divided up into a presentation consisting of the introduction and purpose for the meeting, and then we're going to do an overview of the project. We're going to discuss the environmental review process, and then briefly go through the draft EIR and the contents and findings in the EIR. We'll talk about how to make a public comment, and then we'll open up the meeting for public comments on the EIR. During the first 5 portions of the meeting, participants are muted. When we get to the comments portion, you'll have the opportunity to speak if you wish to make a comment on the EIR. People will have the ability to raise their hand and be called upon to make their comments. We'll provide more instructions on how to present your comments when we get to that part of the meeting. We've scheduled approximately a half an hour for the presentation and another hour or so for the public comments, but we'll stay until we hear all public comments. Before we get started with the meeting agenda, here's some logistical information. Tonight's meeting is being recorded, and the recording for this meeting, as well as subsequent meetings and past meetings, will be available on our project website. We'll have about a 30-minute presentation, and and then the rest of it will be our time will be for public comment. If you have access to a computer with a microphone, you can watch, listen, and provide comments through your computer using the Teams meeting link. If you do not have access to a computer with a microphone and wish to ask a question or make a comment, you must call in by dialing 916-318-9542. When prompted, enter the conference ID 267-775-23#. We can then provide this. We can also provide this information in the chat. And if you are participating by phone, you must also mute the sound on your computer so that we can hear you well. As I mentioned, all participants are currently muted and the meeting chat is disabled during the presentation. Please remain muted and hold your comments until the end of the presentation. First, a few introductions. The proposed project team consists of county staff, specifically the Community Development and Infrastructure Department's Policy Division, who have prepared the draft documents that make up the project. Daisy Allen, our project manager, couldn't be with us tonight, but Natisha Williams, a senior planner with the division, is here. As required by state law, we've prepared an environmental document to analyze impacts of the proposed project. To prepare that document, called an Environmental Impact Report, the county has hired DUDEC, who has both knowledge and qualifications and experience preparing EIRs. The DUDEC team is managed by Stephanie Strelo, who will be presenting with me tonight and who will walk us through the EIR process. Also with us today is Catherine Wade, Deputy Project Manager. And in addition, the EIR team includes Kimberly Horn, Specialist in Transportation, who have analyzed the impacts for the projects on the county's roadway system. Okay. Let's see, I got a little bit ahead here. Sorry. Okay. So again, the meeting purpose tonight is to inform the community and agencies about the proposed project and about the EIR process and the draft EIR, and go review the major findings of the draft EIR. We're also wanting to inform the community about how to submit official comments on the EIR and future opportunities for input, and receiving oral comments on the draft EIR later tonight. Okay, the proposed project will amend the county's general plan and county code, and therefore the project area includes all of the unincorporated lands within Santa Cruz County. Generally, the amendments that are part of the proposed project would not affect development within the 4 cities in the county. The county is divided into 14 planning areas and is served by urban and rural services lines, which divide our urban areas from our natural resources, agricultural land, and open spaces. And our urban areas are where more of a population, housing, and commercial growth is planned for. In 1979, the voters passed the Measure J initiative, which, with great foresight, sought to protect the county's resources in agricultural areas and provide for affordable housing. Measure J remains in effect and is one of the strongest foundations for planning for the county's future, and the proposed project seeks to work within that framework. So a little bit about the proposed project. What is the sustainability update? The project has 4 main components. Amendments to the general plan, which hasn't been comprehensively updated for 25 years or more, and also includes our local coastal program. Amendments to the county code, new design guidelines, and amendments to the land use and zoning maps. We'll discuss each of these project components in more detail during the presentation. The sustainability update has several key goals. First, the project implements the Sustainable Santa Cruz County Plan. This was a planning study that was accepted by the Board of Supervisors in 2014, and provided lots of public input and visioning during that process. The sustainability update will accommodate growth in the urban areas in a more sustainable fashion, primarily around key transportation corridors for coordinated development of the built environment with improvements to infrastructure that can support that development. Second, the project aims to update, streamline, and modernize the zoning code and other related county code sections. The project also addresses projected growth. Santa Cruz County, like all California jurisdictions, is required under state planning law to plan for and accommodate a certain amount of population, housing, and economic growth. So this update of the general plan anticipates a 20-year planning horizon, accommodating growth from 2020 to 2040. Finally, consistency with the new adopted county plans and new state legislation also informs the project. Planning law requires jurisdictions to reflect and be consistent with a variety of state laws, as well as regional plans developed for the area. And if a jurisdiction is located near the coast, the California Coastal Act as well. As mentioned, the sustainability update includes 4 components. First, the project will comprehensively amend the introduction, land use, and circulation elements of the general plan. We'll incorporate a new emphasis on sustainability and integration of the vision and guiding principles and land use and transportation recommendations from the Sustainable Santa Cruz County Plan. New population, housing, and employment targets will be accommodated for 2040. We'll be integrating strategies and policies from various local, regional, and state plans and regulations. The new built environment element integrates existing chapters 2 and 8, the land use and community design chapters, with a focus on more sustainable residential and commercial development. The new access mobility element reflects a focus on movement of people rather than movement of vehicles. The project also partially amends Chapter 5, which has been renamed the Agricultural Resources and Conservation element. Changes to this chapter focus on agriculture, timber, water, and groundwater policies, among other things. The project also partially amends Chapter 7, which is the Parks, Recreation, and Public Facilities element. And this would be to be consistent with the Park Strategic Plan and to ensure that county facilities are adequate to accommodate projected growth. Other general plan chapters will not be changed substantively, if at all. These chapters include Chapter 4, Housing, which is scheduled to be updated next year. Chapter 6, Public Safety, which was amended in 2020 and is in review with the Planning Commission, the Coastal Commission. And Chapter 9, Noise, which was adopted in 2019. The second component of the project is amendments to the county code to both modernize the code and align with changes being made to the general plan. An easier to comprehend permit framework is proposed, with a new site development permit added for physical development of any site. 2 new zoning districts are proposed to implement related policies in the new general plan. These are the Residential Flex District, which is a higher density district that allows for smaller units at a density range of 22 to 45 units per acre, and is a key change to provide more affordable housing in the community. The new Workplace Flex District allows for a wider range of commercial uses than was previously allowed within a single commercial zone district. In particular, this zone district would enable the development of employment centers with a mix of office, commercial, manufacturing, and research-oriented uses, as well as ancillary, retail, and services. Revised standards are included for higher density single-family and multifamily zone districts, including calculation of density using gross acreage, 3-story allowances for higher density multifamily housing, and smaller lots to facilitate smaller, more affordable single-family homes. New standards are included for a mixed-use development, as well as sites that are developed with a mix of medical uses. Parking standards for all types of uses have been evaluated and right-sized for the intended use according to industry standards. Uses allowed in the agricultural areas have been modernized to support today's agricultural needs and also to allow essential public facilities where absolutely necessary, as well as new regulations proposed for wineries, breweries, and commercial weddings. Environmental standards, primarily codified within Title 16 of the code, are not being adjusted and remain intact to protect our natural, cultural, and agricultural resources. The project also includes the adoption of new Santa Cruz County design guidelines. These guidelines include best practices for both building and streetscape design. This document is intended to guide the design of all projects, but especially multifamily residential and commercial development in the urban areas. There are also guidelines specifically included for the Pleasure Point Commercial Corridor, which is an appendix to this document. Finally, the project also includes targeted land use and zoning map changes on 23 selected parcels throughout the county. There are 2 types of land use changes. The first type is the land use amendments to eliminate inconsistencies between the general plan land use map and the zoning map. And these would take place on 13 parcels. The second type of amendment is intended to implement the project goal of increased housing options and help address the housing crisis. The project includes the targeted rezoning of 10 underutilized parcels, including key opportunity sites along transportation corridors. One parcel is at Soquel Drive and Thurber Lane, which would be rezoned to a mix of residential flex and commercial. And 9 additional parcels located along Portola Drive would also be rezoned to residential flex. This would facilitate a transition in this neighborhood to a mix of multifamily residential units interspersed with neighborhood commercial. This is consistent with the vision for the corridor of the Pleasure Point Vision and Guiding Principles study from 2018. We encourage you to visit the project website for more detail, where you can learn more about the project and also dig into each of the project components in detail. Now I'll turn it over to Stephanie, who's going to help us with the environmental review process.
Thank you, Stephanie Hansen. This is Stephanie Strelo with DUDEC, the project manager for the EIR. And just wanted to give you a quick overview and reminder again of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. It applies to projects that are defined as discretionary actions by a public agency, which has the potential to result in a physical change in the environment, either directly or indirectly. And in this case, the CEQA lead agency is the County of Santa Cruz, with the Board of Supervisors being the decision-making body. And the purpose of CEQA is to inform the agency decision makers and the public of the significant project effects and to identify feasible ways to avoid or reduce significant impacts, including mitigation measures and alternatives. It also is intended to provide an opportunity for the public and agencies to comment on the environmental review process. And again, a significant effect on the environment as defined in CEQA means a substantial or potentially substantial adverse change in the physical conditions within the project area. Next. And this is the overview of the timeline and process for this EIR. It started with the preparation of what's called a notice of preparation that identified the scope of the EIR. This was submitted in summer of 2020, during which time a public scoping meeting was held. Subsequent to the scoping meeting was the preparation of the draft EIR. The draft EIR was released in April 14th. We're now in the public review period, which ends May 31st. And then after the close of the public review period, the final EIR will be prepared, including responses to the comments received on the draft EIR and any CEQA findings and supporting documents, and then will be taken to the decision-making bodies, Board of Supervisors, to certify the EIR and act on the project. And the EIR is a full EIR, is prepared at what's called a program level. The series of amendments are amendments to the general plan and the county code and design ordinance. So it's looking at the whole of these amendments in contrast to a EIR known as a project EIR that would be on a specific development project. There are no specific developments proposed as part of this. And all the topics that could be reviewed in an EIR are included in this draft EIR. Next. And these were some of the issues that we had anticipated being topics of particular concern: aesthetics, land use, population and housing, public services and utilities, and transportation. In particular, a couple of years ago, the CEQA regulations and supporting guidelines were changed to create a new method for transportation impact analysis that looks at vehicle miles traveled, VMT, instead of the previously reviewed metric, which was level of service at intersections and roadways. And based on the review of all the topics in the EIR identified 5 significant impacts. And just real quickly, I'll run through these, but they're thoroughly reviewed and described in the EIR. Basically, first one's agricultural resources, potential conversion of prime agricultural land. And the amendments do not really change much in the terms of what could occur on prime lands, except that it does allow for provision of quasi-public facilities in certain situations that are needed for the safety and welfare of the public. So there could be limited situations in which there might be minor areas in conversion of prime farmland. The EIR does include a mitigation measure that would expand a proposed policy that reviews the placement of these facilities of a certain size and requires mitigation. But because it still would be potential conversion of agricultural land, even in minor limited amounts, the EIR concluded that the impact was significant and unavoidable. The second impact is related to biological resources and potential conversion of sensitive riparian habitat on one of the opportunity parcels that was evaluated in the EIR. And this had to do with undergrounding an existing stream, putting it in an underground storm drainage pipe. And there's a mitigation that would require restoration and compensation for this loss, but the EIR conservatively concluded that the impact may be unavoidable in the event that the mitigation was not feasible or was not successful. For cultural resources, a potential impact historical resources were identified primarily within the urban services area, where there would be a potential to demolish and redevelop buildings that might be considered historical resources under CEQA. There was a mitigation included that laid out a process on how to evaluate these buildings and measures to be taken, but it would still result in an unavoidable significant impact if a building was found to be a historical resource and was demolished as part of a redevelopment project. For transportation VMT, we looked at the VMT under existing conditions and with the project under the metrics that are established in the county's VMT thresholds. The EIR found that the VMT would actually decrease from, would be lower than under existing conditions, but it would fall short of meeting the county's threshold for VMT and therefore would result in a significant unavoidable impact. The EIR does discuss and address the various measures that are being implemented and policies that would reduce VMT and other improvements related to transit and pedestrian bicycle facilities, although a lot of those are not fully funded or uncertain as to whether they would be implemented. And therefore, the conclusion was the impact would be significant and unavoidable. And then lastly, with regards to utilities and water supply, the EIR concluded that the 6 major public water agencies would have adequate supplies to accommodate development indirectly resulting from the project. However, the projections come close for 2 water agencies, the City of Santa Cruz Water Department and Soquel Creek Water District. So for those reasons, depending on growth and the timing, there may be a situation where development is approaching the limit of available supplies. The county proposed plan does include policies that would require that development show proof of water supply before being approved and several other measures. But to be conservative, we concluded this was a potentially significant and unavoidable impact. And for both the VMT and the water supply, the same impact was found under cumulative conditions in which there could be a potentially significant cumulative VMT impact, as well as the water supply impact for the city of Santa Cruz and Soquel Creek Water District. As required by CEQA, the EIR looked at three alternatives, evaluated three alternatives. There are also a number of alternatives that the county considered and for various reasons determined they weren't appropriate to carry forth into the analysis, and those are fully explained in the EIR. The alternatives that are evaluated in the EIR include the no project, which is required under CEQA, and that is the circumstances under which the project would proceed if this sustainability update is not adopted. And under CEQA, if a no project could foreseeably lead to other development or growth that is evaluated. So in this case, the no project is essentially continued development under the existing general plan without any of the new policies and ordinance changes that would facilitate sustainable development in the urban area. Alternative 2 is a reduced growth alternative. And under this alternative, potential growth in adult development would occur at a rate that is consistent with AMBAG's current adopted population housing forecasts, which would be slightly lower than the rate that we had reviewed as part of the project. And then alternative 3 is a reduced project alternative. And under this situation, the 10 parcels in the urban area along Portola and Soquel and Thurber Lane would retain existing land use and zone designations, and policies and regulations that would allow public and quasi-public uses on ag lands would be eliminated. And the EIR looks at a comparison of impacts under each of these alternatives. And for the purpose of CEQA, as required by CEQA, the EIR concludes that alternative 2, reduced growth, is the environmentally superior CEQA alternative of the alternatives analyzed. Next. Turn it back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie. We wanted to take a moment to go over the timeline for the project. The draft general plan amendments, county code amendments, design guidelines, and map amendments were made available on the project website at the end of February and are available for public review now. You'll be able to review and comment on these documents throughout the public process until the documents are adopted and the EIR certified. This evening's meetings is one in a series of community meetings. There were 5 other community meetings, and those meeting recordings are posted on the website. The draft environmental impact report was released on April 14th and is available for public comment until May 31st. So in addition to taking public comments tonight, you'll also be able to access the documents and comment until that time. The Planning Commission, as well as other county commissions with an interest in the project, are holding study sessions this spring and summer. After these study sessions, a final EIR will be released, which will address the public comments that were collected on the draft EIR. And at the same time, we may update versions of the project documents and have them be released for consideration by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Next, public hearings at the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors are scheduled to begin in August and will be held through the beginning of December. After adoption at the Board of Supervisors, most amendments will need to go on to the Coastal Commission for certification. So tonight we're making a comment period available, or a comment opportunity available for people who would like to comment on the EIR. You can provide your oral comments tonight, or you can also provide written comments at any time up until May 31st. To make your comments most useful, please focus your comments on the adequacy of the EIR document as it analyzes impacts. Ways in which significant impacts might be reduced or avoided or mitigated would also be a good place to start. And any additional specific mitigation measures that can be identified to offset impacts would be very helpful. All written comments on the draft EIR need to be received by the end of the workday on Tuesday, May 31st. If you submit written comments, please include a return address and your name with your comments. Comments need to be sent to myself at the address below if you're submitting written comments by snail mail. But you can also access the EIR on our county website, and then just email your comments to the email address included on the slide, sequa-nepa@santacruzcounty.us. Please include a subject line on the emails, sustainability update, EIR comments. That will be helpful. Okay. So now we've reached the point in tonight's meeting where we're going to open it up for public comment. If you are using your computer, you can type your comment or question into the meeting chat box, which I will have to open in just a moment, so give me a moment. You can raise your hand by clicking on the hand signal symbol at the top of your screen, or choose raised hand and wait to be called on. When the moderator announces your name or phone number, click on the microphone button at the top of your screen to unmute yourself and start speaking. To comment, please state your name and proceed with your comment. At the end of your comment, your microphone will be muted again. If you no longer have a comment or question, click again on the hand symbol to lower your hand. If you wish to make a comment by phone, enter *6 to unmute your phone. I think we are going to go through the questions and comments by phone first, and then we will open up the chat. So I'm going to ask Natisha if she would be able to help us call on folks who have their hands raised.
Yes, so everyone should be able to have access to be able to raise your hand now. You've got access to your mic and your camera now. So if you have a question, just simply click the raised hand and we can answer your question, or you can provide your comment. Right now, there are currently no hands raised. Oh, there is one. There we go. Darius, you can unmute yourself and provide your comment or ask your question.
Can you go a little more detail on what's going on? What exact those 10 parcels on Portola? Well, 10. There's a bunch on Portola and then Thurber, but what parcels in particular, and what's the strategy there?
Yeah, it seems like that's more of a question than an EIR comment. There are 9 specific parcels, and I don't know that I have the map up right now, but the strategy is to start to see the redevelopment of that western part of Portola Drive to be consistent with the Pleasure Point plan and offer a mix of housing and commercial in that area. I can point you in the right direction on the project website if you want to email me tomorrow.
Okay, I'll go look. I'll spend more time noodling around on it. Maybe
Thank
I can
you.
find it. Thank you.
And there are no other raised hands at this time, so if you would like to provide a comment, feel free to raise your hand, or we'll have the chat open here in a moment if you'd prefer to provide your comment by chat.
Okay, the chat should be enabled now. Thank you.
Okay. So it looks like Darius has raised their hand again. I don't see any other comments, so we can you can unmute yourself and provide your comment at this time.
I'm just curious, given this is EIR relate and so forth, where in this mix is that whole Park Avenue 36 unit project, and how does what's going on with this EIR kind of modulate with Park Avenue project? So let me rephrase it. Does it have any impact on the Park Avenue project?
Yeah, I'm happy to try to address that. The sustainability EIR is completely different than the Park Avenue project, which is something allowed by the state under home key funding. And so that project is right now undergoing the process of federal environmental review and trying to get their funding from the state, and then would submit permits and be subject to that regulatory process. And the sustainability update wouldn't affect that at all, and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't see any other hands raised or other comments in the chat at this time.
Okay, would anybody like to make a comment on the EIR itself? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So what we can do is direct folks to look at the environmental document and review the environmental document on the county's website. It's included in at this link where the draft EIR is, and comments will be accepted. There's a link there for reaching that CEQA-NEPA at Santa Cruz County email, and it's best to email comments directly to that email. I know it's a little bit confusing, but if you visit the project website, you can also make comments on the project using the public comment portal there, or email folks at the sustainability update at santacruzcounty.us email. Either way, we'll get your comments into the right place. Natisha, are there any other comments?
It looks like David Reed would like to provide a comment.
Great.
Hi, Stephanie, could you just take a second and explain what the response process is for community members that make a comment versus a question versus a suggestion in the EIR process, and what is our response to those if they just make a comment versus if they ask a question or make a suggestion, just for people who've never maybe commented on an EIR so they understand how we respond to comments, questions, suggestions, and such.
Thank you, David. That's very helpful. Stephanie, can I rely on you to answer that question for David and the other members of the public? Because I agree it can get confusing if you're commenting on the project versus just asking a question and what actually gets addressed in the EIR process.
Sure. So the comments, what we'll be looking at in the final EIR, we'll take in all the comments that come in, but we will be responding to comments that are specifically related to analysis in the draft EIR. So it's most helpful if the comments on the draft EIR are addressing some component of the analysis in the EIR, the impact, the mitigation measures. If there's a suggestion, we'll look at that and we'll respond to that in the final EIR. Sometimes people ask questions in the comments. We don't encourage that. Again, it's more useful when there's a comment on the analysis in the EIR or suggestions on mitigation measures or alternatives. But all comments will be included in the final EIR document. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes, I think it helps, but I'm wondering, Dave, did we answer the question adequately?
Yeah, no, I understand it. And I think that hopefully that helps people understand how to direct or how to phrase or form their comments to be most productive to what they're interested in or of value to your put to the process. So.
Yeah, and thank you. And if I appreciate that. And if there are just questions on kind of what's in the project or where can I find something or, you know, we're happy to help with that. And people can email me directly or the sustainability update email, either way. Okay, not seeing any other hands raised or Natisha, is there anything in the chat? I'm not looking there.
Nope, not at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, the comment period remains open until the end of May. So please, you know, this isn't your only opportunity, but we wanted to make sure that we had a meeting for folks who wanted to get that overview and have a quick analysis of what's in there. Please feel free to reach out to us at any of the emails and the public comment portal on the website. And thank you all for listening tonight. We certainly appreciate it. And we are looking forward to any final written comments that come out so we can address those. All right, I hope everybody has a very good evening. Thank you for joining us. Bye, all.
Bye.